Meanwhile, the West Africa Civil Society Institute has expressed worry over the increasing intolerance of African leaders to citizens' rights. The institute, while commissioning its Nigeria office in the nation's capital, Abuja, says that there is a need to hold governments accountable, however worried over the inability of many civil society groups on the continent to do so due to lack of funds. The institute says Africans' civil society groups must be self-sustaining and look inwards to be able to mobilize resources in an effort to fight social injustice and restrictions placed by intolerant African governments.
In place certain legislations that restricts such rights to speech, right to free press, human rights violations here and there. And of course, we have other situations around insecurity, which restricts movement. It's also contributing to restrictions around civic space, inability to mobilize the resources that we require to do our work as social movement, as civil society actors. All this contributes to the restrictions that we are facing, which hampers the work that we do.
There's a need for us as Africans and as West Africans to look at what resources we have and be able to mobilize those resources to support our own development. And we do it. We already give as Africans, but we give a lot to family. It is communal, what we do. And so how do we translate that giving to start to support the kind of social justice work and activism that we need to do?
The West Africa Civil Society Institute has said it is concerned about the shrinking civic space in Nigeria, which limits the operational effectiveness of civil society organizations, constrains their geographic reach, and heightens security risk for local staff. This is according to the Executive Director of the Institute, Nana Afadzinu, at a press conference in Abuja, which aroused the launch of the West Africa Civil Society Institute node for Nigeria. She added that, among other things, gender inequality in the already shrinking civic space is why women-themed advocacies are not gaining traction in the country. Speaking on the launch slated for Wednesday, November 16, 2022 in Abuja, Afadzinu said Node Nigeria aims to build a formidable and influential civil society which boosts activism and civic engagement in the country.
But one of the things that is important is for us to encourage and build that kind of environment for volunteerism, that kind of environment that enables our youth to see why they need to become, their consciousness, their civic consciousness needs to be enhanced. It used to start in the universities many years ago. So why has that changed? One of the areas is because politics has infiltrated our universities. Even our university, student unions have become politicized in many of our countries. So these are some of the areas that we will be working. There are already organizations in this country who are working with the youth. So how do we strengthen? For WACSI, we don't intervene specifically on some of the themes that organizations are already, they have the expertise, they are working on it. What we do is to strengthen those organizations so that they can do their work better.
Inability to mobilize the resources that we require to do our work as social movement, as civil society actors, including as media, restrictions on you reporting what you have seen, the way you have seen it, without fear or favor to any individuals, institutions, or entities. All this contributes to the restrictions that we are facing, which hampers the work that we do as citizens, as media, as civil society organizations. How are we trying to address this? Looking at strengthening organizations that are pushing back against these restrictions. Organizations working around human rights protections, working around enabling environment, working around free press, freedom of expression and association.
The West Africa Civil Society Institute is to support Nigerian civil society organizations in their efforts to promote an open, free and inclusive society. The executive director of the institute, Nana Afadzinu, stated this in Abuja while addressing journalists. Austin Ayembe reports.
The institute, which has been working with several civil society organizations in the West African sub-region, is concerned about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on some civil society organizations in Nigeria, as evident by the survey carried out. Findings revealed that out of 80 civil society organizations that took part, 38.4% have funding reduction from major donors, whereas 58.1% were unable to raise any domestic resources.
This revealed the fragility of the financial sustainability of many CSOs in the country. It also points to the compelling need for CSOs to look inward towards reducing their dependency on foreign sources of support. Therefore, in the face of shrinking international support, it has become expedient to broaden the support base available and accessible to CSOs in the country to involve every Nigerian.
This has given rise to vulnerability of some civil society organizations to digital security threats and technological capacity gaps plaguing actors. The launch of the institute in Abuja this month will open doors to civil society organizations in Nigeria for support. In Abuja, Austin Anyebe, and
the West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI, wants civil society organizations to be steadfast in promoting ideas and programs that will improve the living standards of the citizens. The executive director of the institute, Mrs. Nana Afadzino, made the call at a news briefing in Abuja ahead of its official launch of the WACSI node, Nigeria. Abubakar Bestu has the details.
Civil society organizations, CSOs, are non-state actor organizations formed as the important source of information for both citizens and government. They monitor government policies and actions and hold government accountable. The executive director of the West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI, Mrs. Nana Afadzino, said the presence of the institute in Nigeria will strengthen the citizen space in the country. She said the institute will support CSOs in the country in a manner every Nigerian will feel the impact.
It also includes working with partners in Nigeria to strengthen the civic space in Nigeria and enabling the effective participation of citizens in their own governance, as well as working on resourcing challenges for civil society organizations with a focus on exploring alternative sources of funding and strengthening local philanthropy.
While assuring that measures will be taken to minimize effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, which exposed the vulnerable nature of the finances of the CSOs, stressed the need to look inwards to reduce dependency on international support.
Therefore, in the face of shrinking international support, it has become expedient to broaden the support base available and accessible to CSOs in the country to involve every Nigerian.
Speaking on the WACSI Note launch, the head Policy Influencing and Advocacy Unit, Ms. Omolara Balogun, explained that it will cater for all categories of CSO-related organizations.
The note will be primarily responsible for civil society constituency in Nigeria. Civil society, including the non-governmental organizations, the community-based organizations, faith-based institutions, women's association and network.
The WACSI will, among other responsibilities, expected to train, mentor, and coach all CSOs to conform with emerging challenges. In Abuja, Abubakar Bestu, Radio Nigeria.
To speak more on the role of the West African Civil Society Institute, we have with us in the studio the Executive Director, Mrs. Nana Afadzino. You're welcome to Radio Nigeria Network Studio.
Thank you very much.
What does West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI, stand for?
Thank you. So WACSI is the West Africa Civil Society Institute, like you've said. And just listening to the radio, the news today, you've been talking a lot about the work that civil society organizations are doing. Mm-hmm. Now, what WACSI does is to strengthen those institutions to be able to do their work even better. The question is, who is taking care of those civil society organizations that are doing great work? And that is WACSI's role.
Right.
So we strengthen the capacity of civil society organizations to be efficient, to be effective, to be sustainable and resilient.
Okay. So how many countries of the sub-region have you impacted with your programs, and what is the essence of WACSI Node Nigeria, the program due to be launched next week?
Thank you. So in West Africa, which has, it's 15 ECOWAS countries, we have worked a lot in about 13 of those countries. We've impacted, our work has impacted 13 of those countries, and plus Cameroon, because we work also across, I mean, it's the 15 ECOWAS countries plus Chad, Mauritania, and Cameroon. And the 13 out of the 15 ECOWAS countries plus Cameroon, we've done a lot of work there. There's still some work that needs to be done in Chad, Mauritania, and those are places that we are continuing to reach out to. The node is, the essence of the node is really to bring WACCI's services and service offerings closer to civil society in Nigeria, especially those that would not be able to reach, take advantage of the work that we have online. We are closer to them, and the office will be able to connect them to the offerings, the service offerings that WACCI gives, so that they can take advantage of it.
Okay. Mrs. Afajinu, how do you plan to close the gaps occasioned by the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as we know, impacted negatively on almost every sector?
Well, I think some research that we did showed clearly that there was a major challenge when it came to financial sustainability of organizations. And one of the areas that WACCI works in is domestic resource mobilization and local philanthropy, and how we strengthen that and enable that the resources that we have to support the work that civil society does, particularly work in social justice, social protection, social accountability. And so that is one area that we'll be working in, as well as issues around technology capacity. There was a huge gap, and that is why many organizations struggle, because many had to move online. And how do we work online, work effectively online, and also have the protections that we need to be able to do our work online? That is also another area. And so the tech work, technology in development for civil society is one key area that WACCI is working on. We also are continuing with what our core mission is, strengthening organizations. We want to have strong organizations. And so even as we work to support building the capacity of organizations, we are also working with global partners to look at the international development system to say, how do you support local organizations a lot more, shift the power, and make sure that local organizations are stronger than they were. So all these coming together, as well as building solidarity, will enable us overcome many of the challenges that we faced.
Okay, quickly, one of the major challenges with civil society organizations is partisan politics. Does this have any bearing on the activities of the Institute?
Well, for us, it's very key that we work with organizations that are non-partisan, because partisanship does color one's work. I mean, it takes away the objectivity of your work. People will not take you serious, and that's not what we want. And so we work with organizations that really uphold the values and principles of good governance, transparency, accountability, and want to make sure that we are doing work that supports citizens, non-partisan, in a non-partisan manner.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. That was the Executive Director, West African Civil Society Institute, WACCI, Mrs. Nana Afajinu, on the role of the Institute in capacity development for civil society. Thank you for your time with us this morning.
Thank you very much.